Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson, heat pumps, electric vehicles and eating fewer kebabs. The things we all have to do to get to net zero.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel.
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
And we're the top international correspondents at NBC News and Sky News. And we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.
The UK's Independent Advisory Climate Change Committee has just published its 7th report, and it's all about the next steps government needs to take if we're to reach our 2050 net zero goals. It wants us to reduce our emissions from their 1990 level by 87% by the end of 2040. Pretty ambitious, and a lot of the burden is now falling on us. Heat pumps, not boilers, electric vehicles, not gas guzzlers, fewer overseas trips, and you might just want to put down that beef burger. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clarke, is back on the podcast. Tom, so just exactly what is the committee asking us to do?
There were really just two things that most of us as consumers could do to get us 70% of our sort of personal contribution to this whole net zero thing. And they are switch out your gas boiler for a heat pump and swap your diesel petrol car for an EV.
Electric vehicles, heat pumps, of course, and there's all plenty of stuff in there about offshore, onshore wind, cutting down on air travel, planting trees and public transport and all the rest of it. But it's when it comes to meat that I got a little bit grumpy this morning, Tom. They want to take my bangers off me, my breakfast sausages.
That's absolutely right. And they came up with what I think was a really clever way of articulating this.
Go on.
The unofficial metric for meat consumption became the kebab in the briefing that we had. If you were on an 8 kebab a week diet, that would have to become a 6 kebab a week diet. And everyone thinks, well, sure, that's a great thing.
Who's eating 8 kebabs a week?
Apart from the most depraved students out there, who's on an 8 kebab a week diet?
It's a measure of weight of meat, isn't it?
And what we're talking about is a 25% reduction in meat consumption. Now, we're seeing a trend right now that by the 2030s, they think 5% reduction in meat consumption is happening anyway, but we need to be going further than that. So that's a lifestyle change, isn't it? But I was thinking about this. Your doctor would tell you should be eating less meat anyway. We are concerned increasingly, I think, about animal welfare. And let's face it, the cheapest sources of protein, that cheap pork and chicken in the supermarket, I've been to places where that stuff's raised. None of us like it, and we know we need to get away from it. What is wrong with a society in which we make more out of better quality, locally reared meat? We have fewer animals on farmland of higher quality, more land freed up for planting those trees and restoring those peat bogs, higher welfare animals, better diets for ourselves. Yes, it's a bit eco, but it depends on your perspective. If you put the headline, "You're being told to do this," I can see, I wouldn't want to be told what I can and can't eat. But there's another way to look at this, because I don't know if we are going to be told. I think this could happen.
What, naturally?
Naturally.
Yeah, people just are eating less meat. Yeah.
And we're not talking about not eating meat, nor does it say, there's a lot of wiggle room for air travel. It doesn't say you have to stop flying abroad. It's really those people who are flying abroad 10 times a year that have to maybe think about their choices. But going on a couple of foreign holidays on a plane, that is in line with what we could do with net zero, provided we see some efficiency in various things in that sector.
Electric vehicles, right now, no one's buying them.
More and more people are buying them, but you're absolutely right, not enough. Yet currently 2.8% of cars on the road are EVs, and that's got to rise to 80% by 2040. And how is that going to happen? Interestingly, in terms of the tough challenges, it's probably not as difficult, because we're already seeing the cost of those cars come down. They've just got to get cheaper. The predictions are, though, within a couple of years, second-hand EVs should be equivalent. Even new ones, if we see more and more coming in from China, that's a whole different question. Also, and I think significant right now for government, it's not something they're going to have to pay for, other than sort out the infrastructure and make sure that, this is the other key thing, make sure the electricity is cheap enough to charge them.
As of this moment, I would have a lower carbon footprint if I bought a second-hand petrol car, wouldn't I?
So you wouldn't have paid to make a new car. If you could get yourself an EV and find yourself somewhere to charge it, you would make the single biggest change to your carbon footprint above how you heat your home, whether you go on foreign holidays, on all of that combined.
What of heat pumps, though? And this has been something that's been kicking around for an awful long time with precious little uptake by the British public.
100%. So I don't know why I said 100%, because in fact only 1% of UK homes have got a heat pump, given we have been talking about this for more than a decade. So a heat pump, I think the easiest way to describe it, it's an air conditioner that runs backwards. Yeah. Effectively, it takes what little water that it sort of sucks in the air from outside, extracts the heat from that, and even when it's a very cold day, below zero even, there's still lots of heat out there because there's lots and lots of air, and it concentrates it and pumps it into your home. It is significantly more efficient than a gas boiler because you're not wasting any energy in converting it from a chemical into heat.
It's more significantly expensive.
And there's the rub. And it's not just the cost of the appliance itself. And this is where in the UK particularly it gets really hard because our building stock is some of the leakiest, draftiest and oldest in Europe. And we've got to get these devices into homes that are much more energy efficient than the average home in the UK is right now in order for them to run at the efficiency where you'd see the savings that you need, again, for consumers to adopt them. And the reason they're really significant in this report, I think, speaks to the government's sort of core net zero agenda, and it's nailed its colours to its mast very much on that one, is this is where the capital costs and the cost to a government come in. There will have to be continued support through some kind of subsidy for heat pumps to get them into people's homes. I know I'm sounding like an eco-zealot here, but there are some big advantages. But you can't get away from the reality that, the costs are all up front here and we need to figure out a way of doing it.
How are we all, as individuals, supposed to contribute to this drive towards net zero if a large chunk, and I would say perhaps even the majority of the population, can't afford it?
They won't have to. I think that's the idea. This is not something that is going to happen if people have to pay more for something that doesn't bring a benefit to them. I think the tone of how the Committee of Climate Change put this report out, it's not finger wagging. It's, even though they're required by statute not to be seen to be telling people what to do, I think they can feel which way the wind is blowing. And there is a rising sentiment about, politically, about the fact, can we afford net zero? Should we be doing it at this time? The important point here is this is the one thing that would benefit those on lowest incomes the most, because these things are inherently more efficient. You're wasting less of the energy that you're paying for. If the price of electricity can be brought down, and as we get more electricity onto our grid, that should naturally follow, because currently the price is dictated by foreign imported gas, which, as we all know, has been the reason we've all been made so poor by our energy bills recently. We will insulate the poorest from those costs. You're also getting a heat pump that's more efficient, it's cheaper to run, but you'll have to have a better insulated home. That will benefit you as well, both when it's cold and when it's hot. And your health will improve. And we also see big disparities in health because of the effects of air pollution from both gas boilers inside and outside and cars on the roads. There are huge benefits to this. The challenge is, how do you get them paid for? How do you get that upfront investment done?
This is not all about the individual, that actually, from what you are saying, that a large part of this has to be reflected in government policy. Labour, the government, doesn't seem particularly environmentally focused at the moment. The Conservatives, definitely not environmentally focused at the moment. And Reform UK don't even believe in the drive to net zero.
These are definitely difficult times to get these things done. And it makes those of us who've been covering it for such a long time just think, why the hell didn't we get on with it sooner? I mean, in terms of the energy efficiency stuff, we were talking about that 20 years ago, knowing that we'd need to do it because these days were coming, and we've made so little progress because it's so hard to incentivize, so hard to get people to do. It's not very investable for the private sector, to use that awful buzzword. So that's the challenge, but we've got to get on with it now. And the counter argument to that political thing is, what politician would deny voters the opportunity for something that will make their lives more affordable, healthier, and would probably benefit the wider economy through things like the impact on inflation of these big spikes in energy costs and things like that.
We are literally 24 hours away, I think, from a decision on Gatwick Airport expansion, and we pretty much know the way that that's going to go. Gatwick is getting bigger. There are going to be more flights.
How do you square the two? The committee, which again, they can't advise on policy, they were pretty tight-lipped on the whole airport expansion thing. It's a tricky one. There is, though, in their modelling, there is assumed a significant increase in air travel as part of it. So they're not looking at today's and so even with an increase in air travel, there is some capacity for that to happen and stick to net zero. However, it means the air industry does what it says it's going to do and put more of these sustainable fuels in. Those will cost more. I think the story here is, sure, you can carry on flying, but don't for a second think it's going to get any cheaper if the government's serious about it. How you make that one wash, I don't know. It's a big challenge, and we can't see any clear picture yet of aviation in any way getting more environmentally friendly. And it's a really, really thorny one. And for a government that promises to grow, it's just one good example of how that is at odds with this other net zero pressure.
What of the fossil fuel industries themselves? I mean, again, we are talking on the day that BP have announced they are cutting back on the renewable investment and massively scaling up oil and gas exploration. That doesn't sound like oil and gas are going anywhere anytime soon.
They are doing what companies do. They are looking at the interests of their shareholders, and this has been clear for a very long time. The profit, the money, is in oil and gas. You can make a lot more money out of that in terms of returns on your investment than you can from building renewables, because that investment's up front and then the profits come after. So this is, I think this is just oil industry doing what oil industry has done. You could turn that on its head, though, and look at the direction of travel. What is happening in both the US, in China, in Europe, in terms of where we get our primary energy from? Mm-hmm. The direction of travel is really very, very clear. It's not more and more and more oil and gas.
It is a move to renewables, 100%, yeah.
They're more efficient, they're cheaper, and that's what people are doing. They're cheaper to build. Wind turbines now are cheaper to build. So I think you could literally see it as the mask has slipped. These aren't green companies. They never were. Their investments in renewables were largely tokenistic, and we're seeing them just get back to what they really do. And with the change of government in the US, and let's not face it, let's not forget, 75% of our energy use still comes from oil and gas in the UK as well. There's still a lot of need for it. That transition is the one that's going to have to happen. So I think it's quite a natural and an obvious reaction. Long term, I don't think the future looks particularly bright for those people.
Do you buy it? I mean, you've gone through this report. You were at the briefing. We need an 87% reduction in carbon emissions on our 1990 position by 2040. Is this the way it's going to happen?
I want to buy it because I think the world that we get at the end of it is a better one. It just is. It's really hard to argue with how it isn't. What I really do have to be honest and skeptical about is the speed of that transition. No one is going to do this unless it benefits them. And you're not going to be able to politically even manage a transition. You'll just get voted out if you're seen to be forcing people to do things they want to do that make them less affordable.
You say that, but the Climate Change Committee themselves say public opinion on this is overwhelmingly behind. In fact, the Citizens Panel, that group of the public that they brought in to help them put this report together, I mean, they wanted to go further than the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm a great example of this. I've been reporting on climate change for my whole career. It's something I cared about for forever in terms of what the science is telling us and it's going to do to our lives and that of the rest of the life on the planet. But I can't afford a heat pump for my home right now because I can't afford the retrofit and all that stuff I need to get and the heat pump itself. And I can't afford an electric car that would carry me and my 3 kids and wife on holiday at the moment because they're just too expensive. So even people, I think it's absolutely true, people do want this. They would be happy to embrace it, but it has to be affordable. It has to be something that delivers them some kind of benefit, either through their bills or through the way those technologies improve their lives. And when it comes to things like EVs, it's hard to see how the improvement comes in right now. So it involves some trust, doesn't it? Some trust in the technology.
There's a lot of ifs and maybes in this.
And that's why I'm skeptical. What are you supposed to do when your gas boiler packs up? You can't swap it straight away for a heat pump because your house isn't ready. So we need to start thinking now about those sorts of improvements in advance. It's a really tough one. How you get people to do that, how you make it possible for councils to do that for social housing, how you train the skills that you're going to need. You need people to come around who are experts in doing this stuff so they don't leave your house in a worse state. We need to grow the economy. Theoretically, at least, that should be a sort of a Green New Deal the Americans talked about. There is an opportunity there. It's just about getting all those things moving at the right time. But I think being honest from a policy point of view, how fast you can go, because you can't keep setting ambitious targets with no plan to meet them.
When it comes to the overall cost of transition, it's scary, isn't it?
It is hefty. It'll be 110 billion for the government in terms of public sector public costs. Still a big chunk of money, but it's a lot less than we thought, and that's partly because the technologies are getting more efficient. We're understanding what the efficiency gains are to the economy from that as well, the savings that we make, and they really add up, and that's a good thing. Another way you could turn it on its head and think, we spend 40 billion on health in the UK. Now, obviously, we can't take the money away from healthcare. But if you think about the things we spend money on, this actually isn't a huge amount of investment, you could argue, and look at the benefits it brings to the wider economy, to our health going forward. So I haven't even mentioned the planet. Do you know what I mean? And that's partly because maybe I'm used to saying this to grizzled news editors and I know what the political backdrop is. But going back to what people think, most people in the UK, if the polling is correct, they do care about that. They do want, I think British people, if you had to typify them, they do care about their environment. They do care about the world around them. So I think they want to do it. They do want to do it. They've just got to be helped to make those choices.
Tom, thank you. And for much more on the report and what it means for you, just head to skynews.com. And if you like what you have heard, the analysis rather than the instruction to cut down on kebabs, do make sure to follow the podcast. It is just a click away on your app. That's your lot for today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kalnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.